Is your idea investable? That's what we're talking about today in our Lunch and Learn at Darwin Innovation Hub. How about what investors actually look for and what tends to kill those deals before you even get to pitch your idea? That's what we're talking about today, is all about investability of your ideas or your business. Depends on which way you want to look at it. Some are businesses, some are startups. There's a very big difference between the two. We'll look at some of that right now. So let's get started. So most good businesses, they never get invested in. They never get funded. They're good businesses. The idea is not bad, but the signals towards investment just aren't there, because investors aren't the people buying your product. You're not advertising your product. They don't really care about the product. They're buying a version of the future and betting that you're the right company or the right business who's going to deliver that. So they're not buying your product. They don't really have a concern about what that thing does and how it might change the world. They're looking at a future world 5, 7, 10 years away, and how you play a part in that, that you may have a very significant part to play in that, which means really good return on investment. And we'll show what that looks like shortly. So there's 3 different types of investors, really, or 4 if you include the bank of mum and dad. There's the angel investors who get in super early. They're often very emotional in the decisions they're making. I believe in this idea. I like this person. And they back people as much as they back ideas. Then there's the venture capitalists. They're systematic. They're very hungry for the data that's going to give them the best possible chance of getting a 10x return on their investment. They're putting $1 million in. They eventually want to pull 10 million out of it. They think not in terms of just that one company in their portfolio. They think across an entire portfolio. So if everything else in the portfolio is going to collapse tomorrow, that this one thing they're investing in, of you, is the one thing that can carry them through and get them the return they need across an entire fund, not just across your investment. Private equity are looking for established companies. They're not really looking for startups. They're looking for how good the operation is, the systems, the standard operating processes. Not so much the people, more about what the actual process is that can be, expanded, replicated, that the systems will support them. They are buying cash flow, not hope. They can see that these things are already working, and they've got a system they can add to it, which will make it work even better at a bigger scale. So the core question that every investor will then go and ask is, can this return my entire fund? So if I've got $20 million invested and you want $1 million, will my $1 million investment in you bring me back everything I might lose from the rest of the 19 million that I put in? The angels will ask, can they get to 10 to 20 times return on this check that they're going to write? If they're going to write a check for $1,000, do they get $10,000, $20,000 back on that? The venture capitalists, though, they're looking for the $100 million plus outcome. They're looking for a very high valuation when they do exit in 5, 7, or 10 years. Most of their funds last about 10 years. So they're looking for some kind of return on investment that is massively outsized from what the investment is they've made in it. That's why they take a lot of risk. Private equity firms are looking for the EBITDA, the earnings before interest, tax, dividends, and amortization. They want to know if it's real, if there's cash flow really flying through the thing, and is that cash growing? Bank of mum and dad, though, they talk about things like, will this bring me more money for my retirement? If I'm going to give my kids $500,000, am I going to get 2 million back eventually? Or am I just going to get my $500,000 back? Which is often all they're really concerned about, is just getting the money back that they put into it, not losing money. Which gets us to thinking, what is the kind of thing that is investable? It's a very big term, very, very big difference between what is a good business and what is an investable business. Both of them are important. Both of them are totally vital to our economy, but only one of them will attract that capital from investors. A nice business could be a profitable lifestyle company. You're running a little thing from home. You've got, your home office, and you're making enough to be able to support you and your family. That's a good business. That's not an investable business. It could be a business where you have built a piece of software, and that piece of software is something that you've built and you're really proud of it. The problem is it's just you. The minute you step away from it, that thing falls down. That is good business, but not an investable business. You could be doing something which is doing great things in your local market. You sold it to a government agency who's going to pay you $2 million for that. But the only problem is that that piece of software or that idea or that process only works for that one government agency. It's not transferable to anyone else. Again, a good, profitable business for you, but not something that can be invested in. You might have steady revenue. You might even have a good idea, but they are good business ideas, not great investment ideas. Investable businesses look for what they call scalable unit economics. And we'll look at what those unit economics look like in a moment. They look for systems. They look for a team. The solopreneur, the single founder on their own, is a big red flag. They're looking for an addressable market that has lots of room to grow. So they're looking for things that go well beyond just the local area. They're looking for compounding growth signals, not just steady revenue the same every year. They want to see more each year, growing bigger, 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 that compounds and almost exponentially grows. And they're looking for a defensible position or a moat, which protects you from others who might try to start the same thing. So the 5 signals that these investors are actually looking for start with: what is the size of your market, the total addressable market? Is this little pool of people enough to matter? Is the money that's in that pool enough to be able to go scaling way beyond where you've got it right now? And then we look at traction. Has anyone paid for this thing that you've released? I've got a little piece of software that I make about $5,000 a month on. It's never going to set the world on fire. It has absolutely zero moat whatsoever, except that I can do it a lot cheaper than the people who are already in the market. But will that make me a retirement fund? No, it gives me a little bit of extra money to play with over the long term. That's not really going to give me a lot to be able to grow beyond that. Now, I might sell it to someone for a certain amount of money. They might say buy it for 4 times what it makes per annum, and then they have that for 10 years. They might buy it for 2 times. It depends on how hungry I am to sell it. And then there's the team who actually executes on all the ideas in this company. The 4th one is defensibility. What is stopping someone from copying your idea or your business tomorrow and coming in and shutting you down? Look at Netflix and the effect that it had on things like Blockbuster, Civic Video, Video Easy. They were indefensible businesses. In fact, they couldn't even defend against other, competitors in doing the same thing that they were doing, let alone defending themselves against online streaming. And then finally, the business model. Where does the money come from in this business? And can that grow? So if there's a business model that says we take a monthly subscription, you go, well, that's great and all, but how do I make that big? And you go, oh, well, actually, what we're going to do is split off this product and we get more subscriptions for that. That becomes more interesting then. The problem is we do tend to, when we look at these businesses, see them falling into the total addressable market trap or the TAM trap. And it's where they make very vague claims about, oh, our total addressable market's worth $50 billion, and they've got no proof of that. And actually providing numbers which are vague and have no proof is actually worse than saying nothing at all. What really works is you show the maths, right? Customers times ACV times realistic capture rate, then admit your constraints. So you go, we have this many customers, we have this many active customer volume, and we've got additional customer, like our acquisition costs of this. We can capture 1.3% of those people, and that 1.3% of people, here is the things that may stop us from that and how we've addressed them. It's not just saying, oh, well, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Everyone needs our product. So our total addressable market is 8 billion people. It's not right. It's not correct. You cannot reach that many people. You couldn't even reach the population of your town with your idea. So the only thing that removes the risk for people like venture capitalists, angel investors, and private equity investors is that revenue, right? Revenue. It removes most of the doubt. Is there traction? And if there's no traction, it's not just money traction. We're talking about like this many customers paying this much. It could be just there's letters of intent from real customers who have made the commitment to actually buy when your product is ready, or wait lists, with email addresses and phone numbers that can be converted into customers, or pilot programs where you've actually measured what this thing does for people, not just people participating in a program, but you've actually got measurable proof that you can say, we had 5,000 people in our pilot, they did this, and then they all said, yes, I want to pay for the premium version. And then the other one is month on month growth. Even tiny little growth, it does compound over time. It just has to be going in that right hand direction across the page and preferably up on month. So that month on month growth, showing a month on month growth in revenue. The one that the investors generally will bet on is usually people who've done this before. Like they have the natural advantage. If you've already done this before, you've already got a success under your belt, then the risk then drops a lot. They're people who've done hard things before, and they don't have to be someone who actually has done a startup before. They could be just a successful business owner. They've done hard things. They have found markets where there were no markets. They've managed to stand out in a crowded marketplace of people who do the same thing. They have knowledge that gives them an edge. That's a bit of a moat. That's a protection of that. And they're asking, can they hire people better than themselves? They don't say that I am the king of all knowledge and no one else knows more than I do. They're not Donald Trump. What they're trying to do, they're trying to say, well, I'm going to surround myself and pay the smartest people who are way smarter than me, because only then can I grow. And they surround themselves with people who they will listen to when they're called out on wrong ideas. This is the gap that kills the most first time rounders, right? They got a great idea, but they have the wrong team put together. They got a co-founder who's non-technical for a tech product. You need a co-founder who is technical, someone who understands, can even build that technical product. Or people who have no sales experience or no sales way at all in a market that really requires heavy, hard sales. I know that, for instance, in my business, that's not my job. I don't do that. I'm not good at it. I'm terrible at it. Marketing strategy is great, but I'm not the one to go and then start building that forward and making that happen. So your moat with defensibility is all about what stops a well-funded competitor from basically taking your entire market and idea from you. And this could be that you have a network effect. We think of things like Dropbox. It grew because it rewarded people for sharing their Dropbox link with others. They would get a discount. And then the people who are sharing the link, they would get additional credits on their account. Or this proprietary data. Is there data you have access to that others don't? Do you know something that they don't? Then there could be the buy-in being low, but the switching costs being high. Once someone starts working with you, the idea of switching to someone else is too high. For me, that is LastPass. So I use LastPass as my password protection software. Now, the good thing is it's great now. It works really well. It has done. I've had it for many years, over a decade. But they got hacked some years ago, which caused a massive problem. And I've actually had to go and change every password I had, about 3,000 passwords. Why did I stay with them and not move to Bitwarden? Because the time investment for me to just update the passwords was going to be less than me going and having to bring everything across to a new system where I have to spend time learning it, where it slows me down at every point. Whereas LastPass just works for me. The regulatory thing, if you get in first when there's a regulatory change and you've got a product that actually makes that regulatory change easy to comply with, you get in first, you find that it's very hard for others to replicate that because they have to do all the research that you had to do, but you did it 6 months ago and you've already 6 months into your business with customers. We call that sort of the first to market. Then there's the brand. People love your brand. There is literally no difference between protein powder brands when it comes to people who do bodybuilding and gym and want to have a lot of health in their bodies. There's no difference. They're all the same. The WPI, WPC, they're all just basically whey protein, right? But some people just are obsessed with specific brands, whether it's body science, whether it's for what they buy from Nutrition Warehouse or VPA protein. They just love that particular brand. But the brand is actually no better. There's nothing better about it, but there's a loyalty that's gained to that brand. So if you can build that brand, and usually you can maybe even build a brand around yourself or someone who's famous already, that will help you. And they're also looking for ideas that you can replicate elsewhere. So that in the case of here, as soon as you cross the Northern Territory border in the South Australia, the product doesn't stop working. You can actually grow this well out to the rest of Australia, to the rest of the world. A lot of people like to fall back on patents. They like to go, I'm going to get a patent, I'm going to get a trademark, all those kind of things, but they're not alone a moat. They're very expensive to get. And they're super slow too. So they're slow to get done. In that meantime, others have got that before the patent is actually in place, and therefore they can get going and get a market and make money and steal your customers. Meanwhile, while you're trying to hide behind a patent pending, they've got the network effects. They've got some proprietary data. They've got those first people in. So the switching costs to go to you now are going to be too hard. So these are all the things you've got to consider. It's not just about saying, I've got a great idea and I've got a customer. It's got to be more. So where the money goes is also where we want to see some kind of idea that you've at least crunched in your head. So we're looking for a ratio, a magic ratio, that lifetime value is at least 3 times what it costs you to acquire a customer. That's what the LTV and CAC mean. Now, ideally, that'd be higher. We'd like to see 5, 6, 7, 10 times the value of what it costs you. So if it costs you $1 to convert a customer over to you, we would like to see $3 or $4 return at least, and then 10, $20 returned over a lifetime, if that's possible. Now, the reality is it might take you $100 to convert a customer over to you. So we want to see the lifetime value of what they're paying you in subscriptions or service fees or whatever, getting out to $300, $1,000. That's a good return. Gross margin then does matter, but this is very different in different ways. Virtual products like software as a service or social networks or software in general, an 80% margin is very different to a 30% margin from delivering services or products that you're selling. So if you're selling products, for instance, 30% is pretty average for a margin. So if you're doing a product where you can get much greater margins, think of the luxury brands, Hermes, Gucci, all those, where they're getting often 3,000, 4,000, 10,000% margin. That's when you know you're on a very good wicket there. You do need to know your numbers. Even if they're not perfect numbers, you do still need to know what those numbers are. So understanding what your gross margin is, understanding how much it costs you to acquire each customer, and then what the lifetime value that you can think of would come from that customer being converted. Because then you've got really compelling numbers that investors like to see. So a few blind spots that will kill those deals before they ever get signed is things like that founder dependency. I mentioned this before. It's where the business can't run without you. That's not a flex. That's a massive red flag. That is a danger, Will Robinson moment. That's saying that the minute you have a hissy fit and you run off, everything goes wrong. Where we have no clear use of funds, that's where, we're going to use the money to grow. We're going to use the money to pay our staff. It tells investors nothing. What they want to see is we're using this money in order to buy this equipment to do this thing, which is going to reduce our cost to purchase of whatever. So we want to see what the use of funds will be and what the benefit to the company will be of those use of funds. Not buying a Lamborghini, not giving everyone a pay rise. It's about what it will bring about. Overvaluation with no value, with no basis, where you decide to pull from thin air. My business is worth $19 million. We've all seen this so many times where someone comes in the office and says, yeah, I've valued this based on this at $20 million. I'm like, mate, you're a guy working from his garage. You're not worth $20 million. Then ignoring competition. One of the greatest red flags I'll get is someone saying, oh, well, we don't have any competitors. No one's doing this. What it signals to us is you haven't even Googled this. You haven't even tried to look for it. You're just thinking that we won't. That's the first thing we do. Literally in a meeting, I'll sit there with my laptop going, okay, looking up what they're doing and going, okay, 36 other people are doing this right now. One of them is actually a multi-$100 million company. How did you miss this? Weak financial literacy. If you cannot explain your numbers, that's a big problem. That tells us there's a massive hole in your financial literacy. Bring along a bookkeeper if you have to. Bring along a CFO. Bring along, an accountant. Whatever you do, bring along someone who understands what those numbers are. And the final one is there's no differentiation. If you can't describe what makes your idea, your business, you special, then you're not special. And your idea is not special. Your business is not special. If you can't explain it, it doesn't exist. And then there's the pitch. When you finally get to do your pitch, this is not for closing a deal. Those Shark Tank shows and Dragon's Den and all that, it's not really like that. We're not doing a lot of that work goes on afterwards. Those deals that are done on the show aren't actually done until due diligence is done afterwards. So that closing a deal in those shows is not actually closing a deal. When you pitch, you've got to understand this is an audition. It's not a sale. And investors will remember so many things about your presentation, including how clear you were with your thinking, whether you handled the hard questions they had well, whether you got flustered, whether you got defensive, and whether they actually believed anything you said at all. You might think that telling investors what they want to hear instead of what's true will be a good thing. It's not. They will see through it. Remember, these are people who have sat through hundreds, if not thousands of pitches just like this. They know how to spot a liar. So for your investment readiness, check first if you're able to explain your business to a stranger in less than 90 seconds. Check first if you have those 3 core metrics together. Do you know them straight off the bat if you're asked without hesitation? 3, a clean cap table. This is basically who owns the capital in your company. Who are the shareholders? Who owns what? Who's being promised what? Make sure that's very clear, because the less ownership there is of others, the more ownership there is to sell on to the next investor, which makes your current investors really think this is an attractive deal. Look for customer references. Are there real customers who will talk to your investors on your behalf and say, yeah, this is great. We've needed this for 20 years. Now we've got it. We'll be with you for 20 years. Know what you're going to use the money for specifically. Break it down on a spreadsheet if you must. And then put your assumptions under a stress test. Have them looked at by people who will push back against you, not people who have an investment interest in you, not people who are your friends and family, someone who understands that hard questions will be asked. Because if 2 or more of these things are not really sitting on solid ground, you're absolutely not ready. And that's completely fine that you're not ready. All these things can be built over time, but they don't make you investment ready. So even if you're not raising money right now, understanding all this stuff is actually really good. It makes you a better business operator anyway. So I know what my unit economics are for each of my businesses. I know, for instance, to acquire a new customer to a cafe costs us approximately $35 in switching costs, in terms of the amount of marketing we have to do, the amount of extra work we have to do, and lost business. It will cost us about $35 to convert them, but the lifetime value of that customer is about 100 times that. Once you've got them and you can keep them, they'll be back 3 to 4, maybe even 5 times a week, spending that same amount of money, $35 or something like that, because they're well heeled, they want convenience, and they want to be able to just rely on what they're getting every day. Do you have systems that are scalable so that the business can run without you? Because one day it probably will. Do you have some defensibility around your idea? Have you built your moats very deliberately? Have you made sure that you're strategically approaching it so that there is protection around your idea? And then finally, your gaps in your team. Have you got the marketing person? Have you got the salesperson? Do you have the financial person? If all those people are in place, you might be investment ready. But that doesn't mean you have to be investment ready today. It just means that get yourself investment ready as good business practice. And even if you're not looking for investment, get investment ready, because that's the point where you will be ready when you need the money to pitch to people who have that money to give. So this week, what you can do to start putting this together is run your lifetime value and customer acquisition cost numbers, the ratio, that magic ratio. What does it come up with? Remember that investors are looking for at least 3 times lifetime value to every dollar spent on customer acquisition. So even if you've got some rough estimates on the back of a napkin, knowing those numbers is what's important. Then go research competitors. Even 1 paragraph is good. Not to dismiss them just because they're not you and you're better than them and all that. What we're looking for is to find where the edge is. You know, where do people stop looking at you and start looking at them? That's the edge. And get honest feedback from someone who's not a cheerleader, who has a vested interest in you or your business. It's somebody who is independent and will tell you what's wrong and what needs work. They may be able to help you get that work done as well, but they will at least tell you what's wrong in that business in the current state. So you can support founders at every stage through the Innovation Hub. We do that. You can find darwininnovationhub.com.au. We've got programs, networks, myself in the Start NT program, providing those sort of services as well. The best thing to do is just to get in touch with us through our reception. We'll be able to do that. And I've got some follow-up work for you to do that help you to pitch a great business, explain it clearly, and be the person who knows your business inside out. You go and build that kind of business, you become very investable. So go on continuing learning, just use this QR code or that URL below, learn.clickstarter.com.au/2026/investable. This is where to start. There's a whole course in there to get you started on that. So it'll take you a little while to run through those individual bits, but it's absolutely free and will help you to understand investability. I'm Dante St James, Darwin Innovation Hub. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.